The wind howled off the Pacific, throwing salt and fog across the cliffs of Carmel as dawn crept over the horizon. Caleb Bryant moved along the cold, empty beach, his boots leaving deep prints in the sand. Every step was heavy. His mother's death lingered in every thought, her memory woven into the endless hush of the waves and the ache in his chest. He came to the beach most mornings looking for driftwood to carve, for silence, for something, anything that might fill the emptiness left behind. That morning, the air was different. Dense fog curled and danced over the dunes, swallowing the world, muting the crash of waves. As Caleb neared a tumble of rocks, his eye caught a strange, uneven mound in the sand, not quite natural, not quite right. He almost passed by. Then a sound, so faint, so broken he thought he'd imagined it, a whimper just beneath the hush. He froze. The beach was deserted, the wind biting at his face, his hands already numb. The whimper came again, desperate, barely audible. Caleb dropped to his knees, scraping away at the sand. The grit chewed his knuckles raw, fingernails tearing, but he kept digging, breath caught in his throat, heart hammering. Every handful of sand revealed more horror, a limp, muddy body, a paw twisted at an unnatural angle, a tail barely twitching. It was a German Shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, almost invisible beneath the muck. Sand was caked around its mouth and eyes. A broken plastic bag covered its head. For a moment, Caleb thought he was too late. He pressed a trembling hand to its side. A faint pulse. The puppy's chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged gasps. Caleb's voice broke as he muttered encouragement, his words tripping over themselves, frantic and raw. "Come on, buddy, stay with me. Please, not like this." He pulled the bag free and cradled the puppy close, feeling its bones, so light he feared the wind might blow it away. A few feet away, something glinted in the sand. A collar, half buried and soaked in filth. The word, dignity, barely visible in faded, cracked lettering. Next to it, the torn remains of another plastic bag, ripped open by sharp claws or desperate teeth. This wasn't an accident. Someone had meant for the puppy to die here, alone and forgotten. Primal anger surged in Caleb's veins, mixing with fear and helplessness. He looked around, as if the person responsible might still be watching, hidden in the fog. The puppy shuddered, let out another weak whimper. Caleb wrapped it in his flannel shirt, holding it tight to his chest. The cold sand was streaked with blood from his hands, but he didn't notice. He staggered to his feet, the world narrowing to the tiny life in his arms. He didn't have time to think, only to act. He sprinted across the dunes, slipping and stumbling, boots sinking in the wet sand. The truck was half a mile away, every step a battle against the rising panic. As he ran, memories of his mother flooded him, her gentle hands, her voice soothing him after nightmares. He remembered her telling him, "Everyone deserves a chance to be saved, Caleb. Even when it hurts. Especially then." He blinked away tears, whispering to the puppy, "You're not dying here. Not on my watch." Inside the cab of his battered truck, the air was cold and stale. Caleb set the puppy on the seat beside him, hands shaking as he fumbled for the ignition. The puppy's breaths grew shallower, its head lolling, one eye barely open. The drive to Carmel Animal Emergency felt endless. The twisting roads, the cliffs falling away to gray water below, every bump sending a jolt through the fragile body beside him. He kept talking, voice rough and uncertain. "You need a name, little guy. Can't let you go without a name." He looked at the collar. Dignity. The word echoed in his mind, stubborn and defiant. "Your name's Quest," he decided, as if naming the puppy could tether him to life. With each mile, fear clawed deeper. The memory of his mother's last days haunted him. How helpless he'd felt, how powerless to save her. Now, with Quest slipping away beside him, that same terror threatened to break him apart. Finally, the emergency clinic appeared through the fog. Caleb burst through the doors, shouting for help. The staff sprang into action, hands reaching, voices urgent, the room spinning with fluorescent light and the sharp smell of antiseptic. A veterinarian, Dr. Priyasani, examined Quest with quick, practiced hands. She rattled off diagnoses: hypothermia, possible broken jaw, trauma to the eye, each word landing like a blow. She warned Caleb. He might not last the hour. Caleb gripped the collar, the weight of it anchoring him to the moment. In the waiting room, time stretched and twisted. Caleb stared at the collar, the word dignity smudged by his blood. He wondered what kind of person could do something so cruel. He wondered if he would lose again, if saving Quest was even possible, or if the world would teach him another lesson about loss. The minutes crawled by. Outside, the fog thickened, hiding the world from view. Caleb pressed his forehead to the cold window, hands aching, heart raw. He didn't pray. He didn't know how, not anymore. But he wished, fiercely, that this time, hope might be enough. Cliffhanger. Would Quest survive? Would Caleb's desperate effort be enough to rescue one small battered life from the edge of oblivion? The answer waited, hidden in the silent space between heartbeats, as the world outside held its breath. Caleb's world shrank to the sterile, humming hallways of Carmel Animal Emergency. The stench of antiseptic and the frantic shuffle of feet haunted his senses as he paced the fluorescent-lit waiting room, Quest's limp body already swept away into the chaos of the back rooms. Every second felt like an eternity, the buzz of the overhead lights scraping at his nerves. He clutched Quest's muddy collar. Dignity, the word almost illegible beneath the grime and dried blood, turning it over and over in his hands like a talisman or a curse. A nurse emerged, her scrubs streaked with Quest's sand and blood, motioning Caleb to sit. Her tone was gentle but brisk. "We're doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. The puppy's temperature is dangerously low, his jaw may be broken, and he's lost a lot of blood. Dr. Sani is working on him now." Caleb's chest tightened. He pressed the collar to his lips, whispering, "Come on, little guy. Hang in there. You're not alone, not this time." His thoughts tangled, memories of his mother's hospital bed colliding with the sterile present. He couldn't lose again. Not so soon. The rain beat a relentless tattoo against the windows. Caleb stared out, lost in the haze of streetlights. It felt like the world itself was suspended, waiting, unsure whether to offer hope or surrender to despair. He replayed every moment, digging through the sand, the whimper, the moment Quest's fragile body surfaced from the grave. He wondered if he'd done enough, if maybe he'd just given the puppy a few extra hours of pain. Down the hall, a door swung open. Dr. Sani stepped out, her expression grave but not yet defeated. "Are you family?" she asked. Caleb hesitated. "No, I just found him. But, yeah, I guess I am now." Dr. Sani gave a small nod, eyes kind but wary. "He's a fighter. We've stabilized him, but it's touch and go. Hypothermia, trauma to his eye. He may never see out of it again. His jaw's not broken, just badly bruised, but there's swelling. He's in a lot of pain, Caleb. He might not make it through the night." Caleb swallowed, the words catching in his throat. "Can I see him?" A nurse led him into a cramped ICU ward, humming with the soft machinery of survival. Quest was laid out on a nest of towels, a warming blanket cocooning his tiny, battered form. An IV snaked into his paw, and monitors blinked, counting down the seconds, measuring the hope. Caleb knelt beside the cage, pressing his fingers to the metal grate. Quest's good eye fluttered open, the faintest glimmer of recognition, or maybe just fear, flickering in its depths. "Hey, buddy," Caleb murmured, his voice ragged. "I'm here, not leaving, not now. You got a name, you got a chance. Don't let them take it from you." The nurse lingered, watching the fragile exchange. "He'll need someone to fight for him," she said softly. "Puppies don't make it out of situations like this without a reason." Caleb nodded, never looking away from Quest. He remembered his mother's hands, how they'd soothed, healed, even when life was slipping away. He let that memory anchor him, steeling himself against the wave of helplessness. The hours crawled by. Caleb sat vigil, his thoughts swirling, loss, regret, the weight of promises made and broken. He remembered the years he'd drifted, the way his family had fractured after his mother's death, his brother disappearing into silence, the way art had become both his salvation and his hiding place. Now, this broken puppy, dumped and left for dead, had become his lifeline. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Caleb fought his own battle, against fear, against memories, against the feeling that hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. He wrote in his journal, the words trembling, "There's something in this fight. Maybe it's not about saving him. Maybe it's about not letting myself give up again. Maybe if I can keep him alive, I can keep something of myself alive too." A commotion in the hall jolted him from his thoughts. A young couple rushed in, their own pet, a cat, wrapped in a towel, eyes wide with terror. Caleb watched the chaos unfold, realizing how thin the line was between life and death, how arbitrary, how fragile. Back in Quest's ward, the night deepened. The puppy whimpered, tiny chest rising and falling. Caleb sang under his breath, old folk tunes his mother used to hum, the melodies frayed by grief but warm with memory. Time became elastic, an hour, a minute, a lifetime passing between the steady beep of the monitor and the rise of Quest's breathing. Dr. Sani checked in every hour, her updates measured, never promising more than science allowed. Sometime after midnight, Caleb noticed a subtle change. Quest's breathing evened out, the tremors lessened. The IV drip was nearly empty, the heating pad still warm beneath him. Dr. Sani returned, smiling, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "He's stable, still critical, but he's fighting." "That's all we can ask." Caleb exhaled, his entire body sagging with relief. He didn't notice the tears until the nurse handed him a tissue. "He's going to need a home," Dr. Sani said quietly. "A real one. Are you up for that?" Caleb looked at the limp, battered puppy, at the collar with its faded dignity, at his own bleeding hands. He knew the answer before he spoke it. "Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." As the storm outside finally broke, Caleb sat with Quest, the world slowly expanding again. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by a stubborn thread of hope. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, two souls battered by loss, both given one more chance. Rain tapped a restless rhythm on the clinic windows, pooling into silver rivers along the parking lot. The world outside felt distant, sealed behind glass, and the relentless hum of the ICU. Caleb huddled in the waiting room chair, spine bent, eyes fixed on the glowing numbers of the wall clock, hands still stained with blood and sand. Time bled into itself. Minutes stretched, curled, snapped back like rubber bands, each tick echoing louder than the last. He pressed Quest's collar to his chest, thumb brushing the faded word dignity. The soft leather, still gritty with beach sand, was a fragile link between past and present. In the haze of exhaustion, his mind slipped. He was a boy again, sitting by his mother's bed. The world shrunk to the sound of her breathing and the antiseptic sting in the air. Even then, the hardest part had been the waiting, never knowing if she'd wake, never sure how much hope he was allowed to keep. A nurse passed by, pausing at his side. "Do you need water? A blanket?" she asked quietly. Her presence was gentle but professional, her eyes flicking toward the closed door of Quest's ward. Caleb shook his head, forcing a weak smile, the kind people offer when nothing can really help. Inside the ward, the world was sharper. The small glass enclosure held Quest's battered body, wrapped in blankets, wires snaking to machines that blinked and beeped. The sight was almost too much, so small, so vulnerable. The puppy didn't move, just the steady, stubborn rise and fall of his ribs. Caleb's memories tangled and looped. He remembered childhood summers on this same coast, his mother's laughter and the warmth of her arms. He remembered how grief had hollowed him out when she was gone, how he'd drifted through days with no anchor, how his brother had vanished into anger and distance. The loss had grown roots, threading through every part of his life. His art, his loneliness, even the ache in his hands. He wrote in his battered journal, words scraping out in uneven lines. "It's always waiting. Waiting for the pain to fade, for the call that never comes, for someone to say it's okay to start again. Maybe hope is just stubbornness that doesn't know when to quit." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room for an instant. Caleb closed his eyes, breathing in the storm. The walls felt both protective and suffocating, a place where time stood still, where fear and hope warred in silence. Hours passed, Sometimes he dozed, jerking awake at every shuffle of feet, every burst of static over the clinic's intercom. In those moments between waking and sleep, he saw his mother's face, her kindness, her fierce belief that broken things could be healed if someone cared enough. A nurse brought him tea. He drank it without tasting, eyes never leaving the glowing red line of Quest's heart monitor through the window. The numbers flickered. Once the beeps faltered and he nearly leapt from his chair, but the rhythm steadied again. Sometime near dawn, Dr. Sani appeared, dark circles beneath her eyes, her hair pulled back tight. She crouched beside Caleb, voice low and calm. "He made it through the night," she said. "He's not out of the woods, but he's stable. He'll have some lasting injuries, a blind left eye, a fractured paw, fear of darkness. But he's alive." Caleb didn't realize he was crying until the nurse handed him a rough paper tissue. His shoulders shook as he buried his face in his hands. The relief was overwhelming, pouring through him in jagged waves. "He's going to need care. Lots of it," Dr. Sani said. "You'll have to be patient. He'll have nightmares. He might never walk quite right, but he's a survivor." Caleb nodded, voice breaking as he replied, "I'm not giving up on him. He's family now." The nurse led him into Quest's ward. The room was small and bright, the hush broken only by the faint hum of machines. Caleb moved slowly, not wanting to startle the puppy. Quest's one good eye opened, searching, uncertain, but his tail gave a faint, hopeful wag. Caleb sank to the floor beside him, resting his hand gently on the soft, matted fur. "You did it, little guy. You made it." Quest pressed his nose into Caleb's palm, breathing in his scent, trembling but alive. Outside, the rain softened, dawn light creeping along the edges of the sky. The night's fear gave way to something tentative and bright, a beginning fragile but real. Caleb stayed for hours, talking softly, humming half-remembered songs his mother used to sing. The puppy drifted in and out of sleep, but each time he woke, his gaze found Caleb's. There was trust, still small but growing, a lifeline for them both. As the sun broke through the clouds, Caleb made a promise, one that felt deeper than words. "I won't leave. Not this time. We heal together or not at all." For the first time in years, hope settled inside him, not loud, not triumphant, but steady as a heartbeat. Sunlight filtered in, slanting through the cottage windows, warming the pale wood floors and the battered sofa where Caleb sat cradling Quest in his lap. Just beyond the glass, the bluffs dropped to wild surf and restless sky, a view Caleb's mother had loved, now claimed by silence and the cautious rhythm of a new life. The storm had passed, leaving the air scrubbed and bright. Each morning felt like a hesitant invitation to start over. Caleb's small cottage, perched above the sea, became both hospital and sanctuary. He laid out blankets and old towels by the fireplace, building a soft nest for Quest, careful to arrange the heating pad just so. The first days were a blur of routines, medications, ointments for the puppy's swollen eye, careful splints for the twisted paw. The tasks became a kind of ritual, anchoring Caleb's hands and heart in the present. He moved with gentle precision, whispering encouragements, never rushing, never demanding. At night, Quest whimpered in his sleep, small paws twitching as old nightmares surfaced. Caleb sat close, humming folk tunes he only half remembered, the songs his mother used to sing when storms battered their world. Sometimes he'd wake before dawn to find Quest shivering beside him, pressed into his chest as if trying to burrow back into life itself. Caleb would hold him, steady and silent, his own breath slow and deep. Daylight brought slow progress. By the third day, Quest managed a shaky step across the living room, his one good eye locked on Caleb's every move. His tail wagged, hesitant at first, then stronger. A silent question. "Can I trust this? Can I stay?" Caleb smiled for the first time in weeks, kneeling to meet Quest's gaze. "You're home now, buddy. Safe." The puppy's gaze flickered, uncertain but hopeful. Caleb began to journal the journey, the battered notebook filling with jagged handwriting. Healing is slower than the tide, but just as certain. Every hour is a victory, each bite of food, each step, each moment he chooses hope over fear. I see my own reflection in him. Maybe we're saving each other. By the window, Caleb set up his easel, the canvas catching golden light. He painted quietly. Quest sprawled in a sunbeam nearby, half asleep. The cottage filled with new routines: mashed chicken for Quest, gentle massage for his paw, quiet walks around the garden. Sometimes Caleb read aloud from old novels or played guitar, the music filling empty corners of the house. With each passing day, Quest's spirit emerged. He never barked, never growled, only watched with unwavering focus, as if memorizing every detail of this new world. Once a bird landed on the windowsill, and Quest perked up, his tail thumping softly, ears swiveling to catch the unfamiliar sound. Caleb laughed, the sound startling both of them. Some days were harder. The puppy would freeze at sudden noises, trembling uncontrollably. Rain against the glass or the slam of a cupboard sent him scurrying beneath the table, heart pounding. Caleb learned to move slowly, speaking in low, even tones, offering treats from his open palm until Quest edged out of hiding. As spring unfolded, the two settled into their own quiet rhythm. Caleb took to sketching Quest as he slept, the lines on the page tracing the shape of resilience. The set of his crooked paw, the curve of his soft ears, the single seeing eye that never seemed to blink. He wrote in his journal, "There's something sacred about the way he watches, never judging, never doubting, just there." One afternoon, as fog rolled in off the sea, Caleb tried leaving the front door ajar. Quest hesitated at the threshold, muscles tight, nose quivering in the cold air. Caleb crouched nearby, offering space but not pressure. After a long moment, Quest stepped out, paws sinking into wet grass, the world wide and strange but shimmering with possibility. That night, for the first time, Quest dozed at Caleb's feet while he painted, the fire flickering gold against the walls. The house no longer felt empty. Grief still lived in the quiet corners, but it had lost its sharpness, blunted by hope and small victories. Every evening, Caleb wrote letters to his estranged brother he never sent. He tried to capture the feeling of each day, the weight of loss, the fragility of new beginnings, the stubbornness it took to choose trust after betrayal. "Maybe that's what healing is," he wrote, "letting the past bleed through, but refusing to let it drown you, finding a way to believe in tomorrow, even if it hurts." By the end of the first week, Quest followed Caleb from room to room, his limp barely noticeable, curiosity replacing caution. He still shivered at dusk, still whimpered in dreams, but each sunrise brought more strength, more wag in his tail. One evening, Caleb watched as Quest nosed open a closet door, sniffing out an old, paint-spattered scarf his mother had worn. The puppy dragged it to his bed, curling around it with a sigh. Caleb blinked back tears, gratitude swelling in his chest. In that moment, he saw not just survival, but the beginnings of trust, slow, delicate, but real. Outside, the waves hammered the shore, relentless and wild. Inside, hope grew, as certain as the tide, shaping both man and dog into something stronger than what had washed ashore. The morning was quiet, except for the gulls. Caleb sat at the edge of the porch, thermos of black coffee steaming in his hands. The air was heavy with ocean brine and sun-warmed cedar, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the gentle hum of possibility. Beside him, Quest rested his head on Caleb's bare foot, fur a little thicker now, scars less visible in the shifting light. Healing was never a straight line, but the puppy's gaze was steadier, his steps less hesitant. A month had passed since Quest's rescue, with patience and silent encouragement. Trust had taken root, blooming in small, miraculous ways. The way Quest trailed Caleb from room to room, the soft weight of his body curled against Caleb's legs at night, the first time his tail thumped at a stranger's kind word. But beneath the progress, shadows lingered, reminders of pain neither of them could entirely leave behind. On this morning, as the last of the mist burned away from the bluffs, Caleb looked down at Quest and said quietly, "Ready to see the ocean again, buddy?" The puppy's ears flicked, uncertain, but his gaze met Caleb's and held. There was fear there, but also hope. Caleb packed a blanket and a battered sketchbook, slipping Quest's faded collar gently around his neck. "Just you and me. No rush." We do this together." He opened the cottage door, the day spilling bright and fresh around them. The path to the beach was the same as always, wind-blown grass, tangled wildflowers, gulls shrieking over the surf. Quest hesitated at the top of the dunes, paws digging into the cool sand, body tense. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring as the sound of the waves grew louder. Caleb crouched beside him, not touching, just offering quiet presence. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe." Step by trembling step, Quest followed Caleb down to the beach. The sand was damp and cold beneath their feet, seaweed tangled in ribbons at the water's edge. Caleb spread the blanket on a patch of sunlit sand, settling himself with his sketchbook. Quest circled, ears flat, tail tucked. He kept a wary distance from the surf, haunted by memories of suffocation and cold. For a long time, they simply sat together. Caleb sketched the shoreline, the gentle arch of Quest's back, the curve of his scarred paw. He watched the puppy's chest rise and fall, watched his eyes follow the gulls, watched the trembling in his legs subside with each passing minute. The sky was vast, the world holding its breath. Finally, Quest took a step toward the water, then another. His movements were halting, almost ritualistic, as if testing whether the sand would swallow him whole. The wind whipped around them, tossing salt in the air, but Caleb remained still, letting Quest lead the pace. When Quest froze at the waterline, fur bristling, heart hammering, Caleb stayed beside him, neither urging nor pushing. The waves washed over Quest's paws, cold and relentless. He flinched, muscles tight, then stood his ground. Seconds ticked by. A single wave splashed his chest. He yelped, a sound of surprise, not pain, then darted backward, shaking water from his fur. Caleb laughed, the sound carried away by the wind. "That's it, Quest, you did it!" Slowly, as if drawn by something deep inside, Quest limped forward again. He sniffed the foam, then rolled in the wet sand, legs kicking, ears flattened in something that looked almost like joy. For a moment, the beach was no longer a place of trauma, but a place of renewal, a place to reclaim. Caleb felt a knot inside him loosen. He watched Quest dig at the sand, nose twitching, one good eye shining with cautious wonder. The world seemed to soften, the pain of the past blending with the beauty of the present. He picked up his sketchbook and drew, capturing the puppy mid-roll, tongue lolling. A spark of life returned. They stayed for hours. The sun climbed higher, chasing away the last of the mist. A few beachcombers passed by, offering waves or gentle smiles, but Caleb and Quest remained in their own world. He wrote in his journal, "This is what healing looks like. Slow, stubborn, messy, but real. Some wounds never vanish. They just change shape." When it was time to leave, Quest lingered at the shoreline, watching the waves with something like curiosity. Caleb knelt beside him, hand resting gently on the puppy's back. "You're braver than you think," he whispered. "We both are." They walked home in silence, the path winding through wildflowers and wind. Back at the cottage, Quest collapsed in a sunbeam, exhausted but content. Caleb watched him sleep, feeling the peace that comes only after a storm. That night, as dusk settled and the world quieted, Caleb sat by the window, painting by lamplight. Quest snored softly at his feet, the sound a balm. Caleb realized that the place of their deepest pain had become the beginning of their new story, a testament to patience, presence, and the slow, stubborn power of hope. The calm after their return from the beach was fragile, like the thinnest layer of glass, beautiful but always threatening to crack. A new routine took root. Each morning, Caleb and Quest ventured down the bluff trails, weaving through stands of cypress and wild rosemary, the world painted with coastal fog and seabird cries. Caleb found comfort in these rituals, the puppy never far from his heel, alert but growing bolder with every passing day. But it was on one such morning, just as the sun was breaking through the mist and the distant surf boomed against the rocks, that something changed. As they crossed the gravel lot near the end of their walk, Quest froze, muscles locking, ears pricked and hackles stiff. Caleb followed the puppy's stare. Parked beside a row of battered mailboxes was an old white van, the windows fogged, engine idling low. A figure sat behind the wheel, heavy boots propped up on the dash, face obscured by a ball cap pulled low. For a moment, time stretched thin. Quest's body trembled, a soft growl rumbling in his chest. Caleb felt a jolt of cold recognition. The same deep-tread boots had left tracks in the sand the morning he found Quest buried. The van's license plate was caked in mud, barely legible, but Caleb fumbled for his phone, snapping a quick photo before the engine revved and the van sped off, tires spitting gravel. Caleb's heart pounded. He knelt, soothing Quest with gentle strokes, voice steady but quiet. "It's okay. You're safe." But the old anxiety had returned, sharp and electric. He made it home with Quest pressed tight against his leg, every shadow in the neighborhood suddenly looming larger. Inside the safety of the cottage, Caleb reviewed the blurry license photo, thumb tracing the numbers. He called the local police station and filed a report, describing the van, the boots, the threatening presence. The dispatcher listened, sympathetic but non-committal. "We'll keep an eye out, sir. But unless there's been a crime..." Caleb hung up, frustration boiling just beneath his skin. He doubled the locks on the cottage door and replaced the flimsy back gate with a heavy chain. That night he didn't sleep, watching headlights slide across the ceiling, every noise outside magnified. Quest paced the floor, unsettled by Caleb's tension, old fears flickering in his eye. The next morning, the threat grew tangible. Caleb stepped onto the porch and found a dead fish nailed to the front door. Its belly was gutted. Its scales flaked away, eyes staring glassy and lifeless at the rising sun. The stench was immediate and revolting. Quest barked, backing away, tail tucked. Caleb's hands shook as he pried the fish loose, wrapping it in an old newspaper and dumping it in the trash. He called the police again. This time the officer who arrived was younger, kind-eyed but rushed, his notebook out but his attention divided. Caleb showed him the photo of the van and the fish, described the feeling of being watched, the sense that someone wanted Quest's suffering to remain buried. "Looks like a sick prank," the officer shrugged, scribbling notes. "Keep your doors locked, Mr. Bryant. If you see that van again, call us right away." As the patrol car rolled away, Caleb felt a hollow chill. He sat on the porch steps, Quest pressed against his thigh, both of them staring out at the winding road. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore, it was loaded. Every passing car, every creak of the wind sent his nerves skittering. To push back the darkness, Caleb poured himself into their routine. He cooked meals from scratch, played old records loud enough to fill the house, brushed Quest's fur until it gleamed. But every evening when the shadows stretched long across the bluffs, he checked the locks again and again, feeling the weight of fear settling in his bones. One sleepless night, Caleb set up motion lights around the cottage, their beams slicing through the black. Quest watched from the window, ears twitching at every rustle in the garden. When a raccoon tripped the sensors, both man and dog startled, hearts pounding in sync. Caleb couldn't help but laugh, the relief bitter but real. "We're jumpy, aren't we?" he whispered, scratching Quest's chin. The puppy licked his hand, eyes reflecting the kitchen lamp's golden glow. Determined not to let fear rule their lives, Caleb took Quest for longer walks, visiting neighbors and local shopkeepers, building connections in the community. He joined a neighborhood watch group, learning the names and faces of those around him. He talked with Mrs. McCarthy, who lived 2 doors down and kept an eye on the street from her front window. He befriended Tomas, the handyman who fixed mailboxes and told stories about the town's old mysteries. It helped, but the sense of threat never fully faded. Caleb started to see signs, boot prints in the mud outside the fence, the distant hum of a van engine after midnight. He documented everything, keeping a journal of the strange happenings, determined to protect Quest, no matter what. Still, there were moments of beauty. Quest chasing butterflies in the backyard, sunlight spilling over the porch, neighbors waving as they passed. The danger was real, but so was the hope that had begun to bloom in both their lives. Caleb wrote in his journal, "We carry scars, but we don't have to live in fear. We build safety together, one choice, one day at a time." But every night, as Quest curled tight against him and the wind rattled the windows, Caleb promised, "No one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm here. And in the shadows, danger waited, watching, restless, the story not yet finished. Spring painted the coastline with wildflowers, crimson poppies, golden lupine, purple vetch, softening the sharp edges of the bluffs where Caleb and Quest walked each morning. With the neighborhood on alert and a sense of vigilance lingering in the air, daily life slowly regained its balance. But something in Quest had changed. He seemed to carry an awareness, an empathy that ran deeper than fear, as if surviving cruelty had carved a space inside him for other people's pain. One Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Sani called. Her voice, usually brisk, held a note of hope. "Caleb, there's a therapy program starting up at the community center, children and veterans struggling with trauma. I think Quest could help. You both could." Caleb hesitated, glancing at Quest, who was dozing in a shaft of sunlight, scarred paw twitching in his sleep. The idea was both daunting and electric. He remembered how the world had reached out to help them in their worst hour. Maybe now it was their turn to give something back. At the first session, the community center buzzed with nervous energy. Children played at the fringes of the big rec room. Veterans sat in folding chairs, some talking quietly, others staring at the floor. Caleb kept his hand on Quest's collar, heart pounding almost as fast as the puppy's. The room quieted as Dr. Sani introduced them. "This is Quest. He's been through more than most, but he knows what it means to heal." The children eyed the one-eyed shepherd with a mixture of curiosity and caution. One little boy, Julian, sat apart, knees hugged to his chest, eyes rimmed with sleepless shadows. Caleb knelt beside Julian. "Mind if we sit here?" Quest eased down, close but not too close, head on his paws. Julian stared, silent, then slowly reached out. Quest didn't move. After a few minutes, Julian's small fingers brushed Quest's fur. The puppy trembled. Caleb saw it, but didn't pull away. A moment passed, fragile and profound. Julian didn't speak, but his grip tightened, and for the first time that afternoon, his breathing calmed. Caleb felt something shift in the room, a subtle sense of possibility. Other children and veterans soon gathered. Quest, never loud or showy, seemed to sense who needed him most. He'd lean his head into a shaking hand, nuzzle close to those who flinched at loud noises. He was still skittish, startling at sudden movement or harsh voices, but his gentle presence drew people in. Over the weeks, word of the one-eyed shepherd spread. Children who hadn't spoken in months found the courage to whisper secrets into Quest's fur. A retired Marine with haunted eyes began sleeping better after petting him. Elderly neighbors stopped by the center just to watch Quest lead games of fetch with the kids, his limp nearly forgotten in the thrill of the chase. Caleb watched it all unfold, equal parts proud and awed. He saw his own pain mirrored in those Quest comforted, the burden of memory, the scars that didn't show. One evening, after a particularly difficult session, Caleb lingered outside with Dr. Sani. "He's not just healing," she said, watching Quest nose a squeaky ball back to Julian. "He's teaching. Survival isn't enough. You have to learn to trust again, to give kindness instead of just seeking it." Caleb nodded, struck by the truth in her words. "I think he's saving me too," he admitted. "Every time I see someone smile because of him, it feels like another piece of me is coming back." Not every session was easy. Loud noises still made Quest cower, and the crowd could sometimes overwhelm him. But each day, he grew more confident, his presence more magnetic. Caleb worked with trainers, learning new commands, watching as Quest mastered simple therapy routines, lying still at someone's side, pressing close during a panic attack, nudging a child's hand when nightmares threatened to break through in the daylight. By midsummer, Quest passed his therapy dog certification, a small ceremony at the center, complete with applause, dog biscuits, and teary smiles. Caleb held the certificate, hand trembling, remembering the desperate day he found Quest buried in the sand. The contrast nearly undid him. Afterward, Julian approached, face solemn. "Does he remember the bad stuff?" the boy asked, voice barely above a whisper. Caleb crouched to meet his eyes. "I think so. But he also remembers who helped him, and now he helps others, because he knows what it's like." Julian nodded, burying his face in Quest's neck. Quest licked the tears from his cheek, tail thumping softly against the floor. That night, Caleb sat on the porch with Quest in his lap, the two of them watching the tide roll in. He wrote in his journal, "He was a victim, but now he's more. A healer, a guide, proof that pain can be turned into purpose. We aren't just surviving anymore. We're making something beautiful out of what was broken." And as the stars brightened above the roaring Pacific, Caleb felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. A quiet, enduring pride, and the knowledge that their story, against all odds, was helping others begin to heal. Thunder rattled the window panes as a summer storm rolled in off the Pacific. Caleb stood in the kitchen, chopping carrots for a stew, the radio murmuring softly about road closures and high winds. Quest lay at his feet, his fur warm against Caleb's toes, but every boom of thunder made the dog flinch, haunted by memories he'd never fully outgrown. Outside, the sky was bruised with storm clouds, and the sea raged with whitecaps. It was a night built for ghosts. The day had begun like any other. Breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, a walk along rain-dampened trails, and a visit to the community center where Quest brought comfort to anxious children and veterans. But by dusk the weather changed, and an unease began to coil in Caleb's chest. That old fear, the one he'd worked so hard to outpace, returned, whispering in every gust of wind. As darkness thickened, the power flickered and died, plunging the cottage into candlelight and silence broken only by the drumming rain. Caleb locked the doors, tested the motion lights, and double-checked the window latches. Quest prowled the house, ears perked, hackles raised. Just past midnight, Quest startled awake, hackles bristling, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Caleb sat up, pulse thundering. From the window, a flash of headlights cut through the storm, a white van idling at the edge of the driveway, engine rumbling low. Adrenaline surged. Caleb grabbed his phone and slipped quietly to the front window. The van's license plate matched the blurry photo he'd taken weeks before. Rain streamed down the glass as a masked figure stepped from the driver's side, heavy boots squelching in the mud. The stranger moved toward the house, shadow stretched long by the headlights. Quest barked, a sound fierce and desperate, more warning than fear. Porch lights in the neighboring houses flickered on, one after another, painting the yard in sudden brilliance. The intruder froze, glancing left and right before sprinting for the cottage door. Caleb blocked the door, heart pounding. He fumbled with the deadbolt just as the masked figure slammed a shoulder against the wood. "Get away!" Caleb shouted, voice cracking. Quest threw himself against the door, teeth bared, barking louder. Each bark a refusal to ever be a victim again. The commotion grew. Lights blazed across neighboring porches, voices shouting in the wind. A siren wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. The intruder hesitated, eyes darting, then turned and bolted for the van. Tires shrieked on the wet road, the vehicle fishtailing as it sped away into the storm. Caleb sagged to the floor. Quest pressed tight against his chest. The adrenaline left his limbs trembling. "It's over, boy. It's over." He buried his face in Quest's fur, breath shaking. Outside, rain battered the cottage, but inside, for the first time, Caleb felt the grip of fear begin to loosen. Within minutes, 2 police cars roared into the driveway. Officers fanned out, flashlights sweeping the yard. They took Caleb's statement, examined the fresh boot prints in the mud, and dusted the front door for fingerprints. Quest paced restlessly, still on alert, never leaving Caleb's side. As dawn broke, neighbors gathered on the porch, faces pale but determined. Mrs. McCarthy wrapped Caleb in a tight embrace. Tomas promised to fix the splintered door. Others murmured support, a spontaneous circle of protection forming around the battered cottage. When news spread about the break-in, the community responded with unexpected power. A group of volunteers started a Justice for Quest campaign, raising awareness about animal abuse and demanding action from local authorities. Posters with Quest's picture, the one-eyed survivor, went up all over town. People brought casseroles, blankets, dog treats. Kids drew pictures of Quest as a superhero, cape billowing, one good eye shining with courage. Caleb, shaken but grateful, found himself swept along in the wave of solidarity. The police investigation quickly linked the masked intruder to a local dogfighting ring, one with a record of abandoning animals along the coast. The town's outrage grew. At council meetings, citizens demanded tougher penalties for abusers. News crews arrived, turning Quest's story into a beacon for the voiceless. For every cruel act, the response was louder, brighter, more determined. In the midst of the uproar, Quest became the community's emblem of hope. He continued visiting the therapy program, his story offering solace to those who had been silenced by pain. He led the annual animal rescue parade, tail high, flanked by children and veterans, his blind eye turned toward the sunrise. One evening, as Caleb and Quest watched the sunset from the porch, Caleb felt the weight of everything they had survived, the loss, the fear, the lingering scars, transforming into something stronger. He realized it wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves, about turning pain into action, grief into change. He wrote in his journal, "We don't heal alone. It takes a community, the courage to face darkness, and the stubborn refusal to look away. Quest gave us that courage." He reminded us what it means to protect each other, to stand up for the vulnerable, to say, "Never again." That night, Quest curled at Caleb's feet, eyes drifting shut, muscles finally at ease. Outside, the storm faded, leaving the world washed clean. Inside, hope burned steady, unyielding, a promise kept, a future reclaimed. Life in Carmel slowly returned to its gentle, sunlit pace after the storm and the final confrontation. Yet for Caleb, everything felt altered, quietly, indelibly. There was a new steadiness in his hands, a warmth in his smile. Each morning, as mist lifted from the bluffs, he rose with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Quest trotted faithfully at his side, healed in body and spirit, his once wary gaze now clear and full of life. The cottage had changed too. Its rooms, once echoing with loneliness, now overflowed with the business of living. Paintings leaned against every wall, canvases vibrant with images of Quest and the wild coast, but also of children laughing, of neighbors gathered in sunlight, of dogs running through fields of wildflowers. Caleb worked on a special series for the upcoming community art show, the theme announced months before, Second Chances. He knew there was no better subject than Quest. Most days people dropped by, neighbors, children from the center, other rescue dog owners drawn by Quest's story. Some came seeking advice on how to care for an anxious pup. Others simply wanted to say thank you. For many, Quest had become a symbol not just of survival, but of the possibility of true healing. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, Caleb poured coffee for a nervous young couple. They'd adopted a German Shepherd mix named Daisy, traumatized, fearful of men, unable to sleep through the night. "It takes time," Caleb told them, voice steady. "Healing isn't linear. There'll be setbacks. Some scars never vanish, but that doesn't mean she can't have a good life." Quest nosed Daisy gently, his quiet presence more reassuring than any words. Daisy, emboldened, crept closer to Caleb's hand and accepted a treat. These simple moments, sharing hard-earned wisdom, watching dogs learn to trust, helping others understand that patience and kindness could rebuild what cruelty had tried to destroy, became Caleb's new calling. The walls he'd built after his mother's death finally began to crumble. He wrote in his journal, "We heal by helping others heal. You never know whose life your scars might light the way for." At the community center, Quest guided other shy dogs through group therapy sessions. Children who once huddled in silence now giggled as Quest trotted circles around them, tongue lolling, tail high. Veterans shared coffee and stories, sometimes falling silent to rest a hand on Quest's broad head. The dog's quiet leadership was a daily miracle, a testament to how even the most wounded souls could become beacons for others. As the art show approached, Caleb poured himself into painting, the images taking on new layers of meaning. His favorite canvas showed Quest standing at the shoreline, a parade of adopted dogs behind him, the sunrise reflected in his blind eye. In the corner, He painted himself, brush in hand, finally whole. The opening night of the art show drew the whole town. Children ran from canvas to canvas, pointing out Quest's adventures. The mayor gave a short speech about resilience and community. Caleb's painting sold quickly, with proceeds going to local animal rescue efforts. For the first time, Caleb allowed himself to feel proud, not just for his art, but for the journey that had brought him there. Later, as the crowd thinned, a woman approached Caleb, tears in her eyes. "I lost my son last year. Your story, Quest's story, reminded me that hope survives, even when we think it's buried forever." She pressed his hand. "Thank you." Caleb swallowed hard, heart aching and grateful all at once. "We carry each other," he said quietly. "That's how we get through." That night he and Quest walked the beach beneath a sky streaked with stars. The air was cool, the ocean calm, the world at peace. Caleb thought of all the scars, seen and unseen, that marked his life. He knew now that scars didn't define worth, they were simply proof of having survived. He thought of the kindnesses that had saved him, a nurse's gentle hand, a stranger's casserole, a child's smile. He remembered how, when hope seemed lost, the smallest act of care, a word, a touch, a promise kept, could build a new future, one heartbeat at a time. He knelt in the sand, arms around Quest. "Thank you for trusting me," he whispered. "You taught me what it means to keep going, no matter how dark it gets. You showed me that healing is possible, and that connection, real, honest connection, is what saves us in the end." As they headed home, the tide whispered against the shore. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer owned him. He understood now. Hope and safety weren't things you stumbled across by luck. They were built, patiently, fiercely, day after day, by showing up, by caring, by refusing to give in to fear or despair. And as Quest curled up on his bed, sighing into sleep, Caleb sat at his easel, painting the night sky with colors only he could see. In every brushstroke, in every memory, lived the hard-won lesson that would shape the rest of his life. Survival is victory, but true healing is connection. We redeem the world and ourselves by refusing to stop loving, by choosing again and again to see dignity in every soul. 1 year later, the Carmel coastline was awash with golden morning light. Wildflowers clung to the bluffs, their colors blazing in the breeze as the Pacific murmured below. Caleb walked slowly down the familiar path with Quest at his side, the air thick with memory and something lighter, something that felt like celebration. Today was different. Today, Caleb carried a small driftwood sign painted in gentle blues and greens. Here, hope surfaced and grew. In his other hand, he cradled a paper bag of wildflower seeds. Quest, now robust and strong, limped just a little on his healed paw, his blind eye catching the sunlight and reflecting it back as a silver shimmer. They reached the spot where, a year before, Caleb had clawed through wet sand and tears to rescue a life everyone else had left for dead. He knelt in the soft earth, hands steady, and planted the driftwood sign deep, its roots mingling with memory and forgiveness. Beside it, he scattered the seeds, pressing them gently into the soil, the promise of new beginnings. Around them, people began to gather. Neighbors, children from the therapy center, local artists, old veterans, and families with their own adopted dogs, each drawn by the story of a battered puppy who'd become a symbol for second chances. Someone started passing out lanterns, delicate and bright, each with the name of a rescued animal. Laughter mingled with tears, and for a moment, the whole community stood together on that windswept shore, united by hope. Caleb knelt beside Quest, feeling the soft fur beneath his hand, remembering every moment of doubt, every small victory. He watched as Quest led a parade of adopted dogs down the sand, tail high, head proud, blind eye turned toward the sunrise. The children followed, waving streamers and singing, their voices lifting into the brightening sky. There was a fullness to the day that Caleb could hardly name. He heard snippets of conversation, stories of animals saved, families rebuilt, people who'd found courage in Quest's journey. The mayor offered a short speech about compassion and resilience. Someone read a poem about scars and strength, And in the center of it all, Quest sat quietly, his calm presence grounding everyone around him. Caleb's thoughts drifted, carried by the sound of waves. He felt his mother's spirit in the breeze, saw her smile in the faces of the children, heard her lessons echoing in the laughter around him. Saving one life can light the world. He realized, with a clarity that stunned him, that in saving Quest, he had saved himself. The act of caring, of refusing to give up on a broken soul, had called him back to his own life, had stitched his own wounds closed. As lanterns floated skyward, families linked arms, sharing the moment. The wildflower seeds, newly sown, would bloom for years to come, marking this place not as a grave, but as a garden, a testament to the stubborn power of hope. Later, as the crowd drifted home, Caleb and Quest remained at the water's edge. The sky flared gold and pink, the tide whispered secrets to the sand. Caleb knelt, pulling Quest close, and spoke softly. "Thank you, old friend, for everything, for surviving, for teaching me how to trust again, for showing me that the world is still full of good things, even after all the darkness." He let the moment settle. There was grief in it, yes, an ache for what had been lost, and for scars that would never fully fade. But there was peace, too, and a sense of belonging that went deeper than words. Caleb wrote in his journal one last time. Trauma's legacy is not only pain, but wisdom and compassion. The world breaks us, but we choose how to respond. American resilience isn't denying suffering, it's the refusal to abandon hope. We redeem ourselves and each other not by erasing scars, but by loving fiercely, again and again, no matter how deep the wounds. He stood, watching Quest sniff the wildflowers, the dog's presence as steady and grounding as the tide. The town would remember this story, not just because it ended in survival, but because it proved that even from the deepest pit, a soul could rise and shine anew. Caleb felt a surge of quiet pride, knowing that both he and Quest had helped build a legacy, a circle of safety, empathy, and courage that would ripple outwards long after today. As dusk settled, Quest led the adopted dogs home, his limp barely noticeable, his body strong, spirit unbroken. The last lanterns floated into the sky, each a tiny sun, burning away the last traces of night. Caleb followed, his heart lighter, the weight of the past finally set down. He turned back once, looking over the wildflower garden, the driftwood sign standing strong against the coming night. Here, hope surfaced and grew. The words felt true, not just for Quest, but for everyone who had ever loved, lost, and dared to try again. In that golden hour, as the world held its breath, Caleb understood at last, broken things do not stay broken. With care, patience, and relentless love, even the deepest wounds can become sources of light. And at the shore's edge, Quest stood, tail high, his blind eye reflecting the sun, a living testament that every life once lost can be reclaimed, can shine, and can lead others out of the darkness.